Most men don't lack attractiveness. They lack accurate self-awareness. For years, I believed I was average at best, invisible, easily overlooked. I assumed that if women weren't openly approaching me or praising my looks, then my value must be low. I was wrong. And if you're listening to this, there's a strong chance you are too. Here's the uncomfortable truth. The men who are most attractive often underestimate themselves the most. Not because they lack confidence, but because they're looking for the wrong signals. They expect attraction to look obvious, loud, and unmistakable. That expectation comes from movies, not reality. Female attraction doesn't announce itself. It moves quietly, through positioning, through timing, through subtle shifts in behavior that most men never register. And because these signals are indirect, they're easy to miss. When you miss them long enough, you start misjudging your own worth. In this video, I'm going to break down the hidden signs that reveal how women actually perceive you. Signals that have likely been showing up in your life for years without you realizing what they meant. Before we begin, leave a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is there. And if you value clear-grounded insights like this, consider subscribing. I didn't realize the mistake I was making at first. I thought I was being realistic. I looked at my life, my dating history, the lack of obvious attention, and I drew a conclusion. Average, maybe below. It felt logical. If I were truly attractive, I told myself it would be obvious. Women would say something, do something, make it clear. That assumption quietly shaped how I moved through the world. I watched other men, the loud ones, the flashy ones, the ones who seemed to attract attention effortlessly. I saw women laugh around them, touch their arms, respond quickly, and I used that as my measuring stick. If attraction looked like that and I wasn't getting it, then the math felt simple. But the math was wrong. The first problem was the standard itself. I was measuring my value using a version of attraction that doesn't actually exist in real life. It exists in movies, television, and cultural stories written for entertainment, not accuracy. Hollywood teaches men that attraction is dramatic, obvious, verbal. A woman locks eyes across the room, smiles, walks over, and makes her interest unmistakable. Anything less than that gets interpreted as disinterest. That programming runs deep. Men are direct by nature. When I'm interested, I don't hide it behind layers of ambiguity. I speak, I act, I make my intentions known. Because that's how I operate. I unconsciously assumed women operate the same way. If they're interested, they'll show it clearly. If they don't, they aren't. That assumption alone causes most men to misread their entire social reality. Female attraction does not function like male attraction. It never has. Women don't communicate interest primarily through words or overt advances. They communicate through positioning, behavior, timing, and energy. Subtle shifts, small movements, patterns that only make sense when you understand the system behind them. When I didn't understand that system, I filtered out most of the data. I dismissed moments that didn't fit the Hollywood script. A look that lingered slightly too long. A woman who kept appearing near me in different settings. A conversation that seemed to pause when I spoke. I told myself these things didn't mean anything because they weren't explicit. Over time, that dismissal turned into self-misjudgment. Another mistake was comparison. I wasn't comparing myself to the average man. I was comparing myself to extremes. Idealized versions of masculinity. Men at the very top of visibility. The loudest, most socially aggressive, or most physically exaggerated examples I could find. When you compare upward like that, you always lose perspective. Ironically, the men who are less attractive often don't make this mistake. They compare laterally or downward. Their standards are lower. Their reference points are closer. That leads them to overestimate themselves. Meanwhile, men with higher internal standards do the opposite. They raise the bar so high that they never feel like they clear it. I did that without realizing it. I expected myself to outperform a fantasy. When I didn't, I assumed deficiency, not knowing that most women don't respond to fantasies. They respond to presence, stability, subtle dominance, social calibration. Another layer I missed was how attraction is processed unconsciously. Women don't sit across from a man and consciously list reasons they're attracted. Their nervous system reacts first. Their body notices before their mind explains. Within seconds of seeing me, a woman's brain was already processing dozens of variables: posture, facial structure, grooming, confidence, emotional control, social awareness, perceived status. That evaluation happens below awareness. Even she might not know it's happening. So when I looked for verbal confirmation, I was already too late. The decision had been made long before words entered the picture. This misunderstanding led me to believe that attraction was rare and approval was scarce. That belief subtly changed how I showed up. I became more cautious, more restrained, less willing to assume interest. I thought I was being humble. In reality, I was miscalibrated. What made this worse was the internal logic loop. If you believe you're not attractive, you interpret neutral behavior as confirmation. If a woman doesn't escalate, you assume lack of interest. If she does something subtle, you ignore it. Over time, your perception narrows until only rejection registers as meaningful information. I didn't realize how selective my awareness had become. The truth is, attraction doesn't announce itself because it doesn't need to. It leaks out through behavior. It shows up in where someone stands, how often they look, how they adjust when you enter a space. Those signals are quiet by design. They protect social safety. They maintain deniability. They allow interest to exist without exposure. Once I understood that something shifted, I stopped asking, why aren't women showing interest? And started asking, what behaviors am I dismissing because they don't match my expectations? That single question changed how I observed people. I noticed patterns instead of moments, repetition instead of intensity, consistency instead of drama. And slowly, the picture corrected itself. I wasn't invisible. I had been inattentive. Most men never make this adjustment. They continue measuring themselves with tools that were never meant to measure reality. They look for noise instead of signal, words instead of behavior, extremes instead of patterns. And because of that, they spend years undervaluing themselves. This part matters because self-assessment shapes everything that follows. Your confidence, your boundaries, the opportunities you pursue or avoid. If your internal measurement is wrong, every decision downstream is distorted. Before anything else can change, the standard has to be corrected. That's where this story actually begins. Once I stopped judging attraction by the wrong standards, I began noticing something unsettling. Women were responding to me long before any conversation happened, long before I said anything clever, long before I tried to impress. Their reactions were already forming in the first few seconds. That's when I understood the second mistake I had been making. I assumed attraction was a conscious decision. It isn't. Women are constantly running unconscious evaluations, not in a calculating way, in a biological one. Their nervous system scans for signals of safety, strength, competence, and stability. This scan happens automatically, faster than thought, faster than language. When a woman sees a man, her brain processes posture, eye contact, facial symmetry, grooming movement, emotional control, and energy almost instantly. She doesn't sit there naming these factors. She feels them. And that feeling shows up in her behavior before she ever labels it as attraction. That realization reframed everything. I had been waiting for interest to start with words. In reality, words come last. Behavior comes first, often much earlier than either person realizes what's happening. One of the most important concepts I had to understand was approach-avoidance conflict. When a woman is attracted, two impulses activate at the same time. One pulls her closer. The other holds her back. She wants proximity. But she also wants safety. Social safety, emotional safety, reputational safety. So instead of moving directly toward what she wants, she moves indirectly. This conflict creates specific, predictable behaviors. She positions herself near you, but not too near. She looks, then looks away. She finds reasons to be in your space that don't require commitment. She maintains plausible deniability. If nothing happens, she can tell herself it meant nothing. If something does happen, she didn't risk everything to get there. This isn't manipulation, it's regulation. Once I saw this pattern, I realized how many times I had misinterpreted attraction as indifference. I thought interest would feel confident and clear. In reality, it often looks cautious and fragmented, especially with women who have social awareness and self-control. Another thing I misunderstood was dominance. Not dominance as aggression. Dominance as grounded presence. Women respond to men who are internally stable, men who don't rush, men who don't seek approval, men who occupy space without apologizing for it. That kind of dominance doesn't shout. It settles. When I was younger, I thought being attractive meant doing more, talking more, proving more, performing more. But what actually registered was how little I needed to do, how calm I remained, how unaffected I was by minor social shifts. That calmness wasn't something I consciously cultivated at first. It came from being comfortable in my own skin, and women noticed it before I did. Social status played a role too, but not in the way most men think. It wasn't about money or titles. It was about how others responded to me. Did people listen when I spoke? Did they include me naturally? Did conversations adjust around my presence? Women are highly sensitive to these cues because they indicate how a man is treated within a group. Status is relational. It exists between people, not on paper. I noticed that women reacted differently when I was alone versus when I was in a group where I was respected. The same woman, the same me, different context. Her behavior shifted. More attention, more positioning, more awareness. She wasn't calculating. She was responding. This is what most men miss. Attraction isn't static, it's contextual. A woman's interest amplifies when a man's value is validated by his environment, not announced, validated. I had also underestimated how quickly these judgments form. By the time a woman decides whether she wants to engage more deeply, she has already observed dozens of microsignals. How I stand, how I move, how I react when interrupted, how I handle silence, how comfortable I am not filling space. None of this requires conversation. That's why some men feel confused. They think they're being evaluated only when they speak. In reality, the evaluation is already mostly complete before the first sentence. Understanding this forced me to stop taking things personally. If a woman didn't engage verbally, it didn't mean she wasn't interested. It often meant she was still regulating her internal conflict, or assessing risk, or waiting for alignment in timing and context. Attraction doesn't always want immediacy. Sometimes it wants confirmation. Another important realization was that women don't experience attraction in isolation. It's layered. Physical appeal matters. But so does emotional presence. So does predictability. So does how a man handles pressure. All of these signals blend into a single impression. That's why women often struggle to explain why they're attracted. They aren't responding to one trait. They're responding to a system. When I expected attraction to be simple, I couldn't recognize it when it was complex. The final shift came when I accepted that attraction doesn't need my validation to exist. A woman can be interested without acting on it, without escalating, without giving me anything obvious. Her internal experience doesn't disappear just because it stays unexpressed. Once I understood that, I stopped chasing proof. I paid attention instead. I watched patterns over time, repeated behaviors, consistent positioning, subtle adjustments that happened only when I entered or exited a space. The data was there. I just hadn't known how to read it. This wasn't about ego. It was about accuracy. Most men assume they're being judged harshly. In reality, they're being assessed quietly, continuously, and often favorably without knowing it. The danger isn't being unattractive. The danger is being unaware. Because when you don't understand how attraction actually works, you make decisions from a distorted self-image. You hesitate where you shouldn't. You settle where you don't need to. You fail to recognize when the ground beneath you is more solid than you think. That misunderstanding costs men years. Once I corrected it, I didn't become arrogant. I became calibrated. And calibration changes everything. The first signals I learned to recognize were visual, not dramatic, not obvious. Quiet enough that I had ignored them for years. Eye contact was the beginning. Not the casual glance people exchange out of politeness, not the quick acknowledgement you give a stranger in passing. This was different. It lingered just long enough to create a moment, long enough to register, long enough to feel intentional. And then it broke. At first, I dismissed it. I told myself it was accidental, coincidence, nothing worth paying attention to. But once I started observing patterns instead of isolated moments, something became clear. When a woman held eye contact with me longer than necessary, she almost always looked away first. Quickly, as if she'd been caught. That reaction confused me before. I took it as disinterest. In reality, it was regulation. Holding eye contact is intimate. It signals attention. It creates a connection that can't be denied. When a woman feels that connection forming too clearly, she often breaks it to maintain control, to avoid exposure, to keep the interaction socially safe. The mistake most men make is assuming that breaking eye contact means rejection. They don't notice what happens next, because the look almost always comes back. Not immediately, not obviously, but again and again, from across the room, from different angles. Sometimes when I wasn't looking directly at her. Sometimes when I was engaged in something else. These weren't stares. They were checks, visual confirmations. She was still tracking me. This repeated visual contact is one of the most consistent indicators of attraction and one of the most overlooked. Men expect intensity. Women offer consistency. They look away, then look again later. Each glance serves a purpose. Assessment, appreciation, calibration. Once I noticed this, I saw it everywhere. Another visual behavior became obvious after that. Positioning. Women who were attracted to me didn't place themselves randomly in space. They positioned themselves where I would naturally fall into their field of vision. Not directly in front of me, not obviously beside me, slightly off. Enough to observe without confronting. Peripheral vision is safe. It allows attention without commitment. I noticed women consistently standing where they could see me without turning their head, sitting at angles that gave them a clear view, choosing seat spots or positions that kept me in frame. This wasn't conscious planning. It was instinctive behavior driven by interest. At first, I thought I was imagining it. Then I watched it repeat across different environments. Different women, same pattern. What mattered wasn't the individual act. It was the consistency. Women who weren't interested didn't do this. They oriented away. They focused elsewhere. They didn't track my movement. They didn't adjust when I shifted position. The difference was subtle, but once seen, it was unmistakable. There was also the matter of distance. Attraction changes how close someone is comfortable being. Women who were drawn to me tended to reduce physical distance gradually. Not all at once. Step by step. Standing closer than necessary. Sitting within my personal space when alternatives existed. Leaning slightly inward during conversations. Again, nothing dramatic. Nothing that could be pointed at and declared proof. But repeated enough times, the message was clear. What made these signals easy to miss was their deniability. Every single one could be explained away. Coincidence, convenience, randomness. That's exactly why they exist in this form. Attraction needs cover. Another thing I began noticing was how women adjusted when I entered or exited a space. When I walked into a room, certain women would subtly straighten their posture, adjust their hair, shift their weight, not performative, reflexive. Their body responded before their mind intervened. When I left, some would glance up, track my departure, then resume whatever they were doing. These weren't rehearsed actions. They were unconscious. At social events, I noticed that women often aligned their position with my movement. If I moved to another part of the room, they didn't follow directly. They repositioned indirectly, appearing later in my vicinity as if by chance. This created what I came to recognize as orbit behavior. They weren't chasing, they were circling. Orbiting allows proximity without pressure. It creates opportunities for interaction without demanding them. A woman can remain near a man she's attracted to while maintaining plausible deniability. If nothing happens, she didn't risk anything. If something does, the opening was already there. I had mistaken this behavior for randomness for a long time. The truth is, women are far more strategic with space than men realize. Not consciously strategic, biologically strategic. Space becomes a communication tool when words are too risky. Another visual cue I began noticing was orientation. When women are attracted, their bodies orient toward the man they're interested in, even if their words don't. Feet pointing in my direction, shoulders angled toward me, torso open, even in group settings. When interest faded or wasn't present, that the body closed, turned away, crossed, redirected. These signals aren't subtle to the nervous system. They're subtle to the ego. Men miss them because they're looking for validation, not information. What finally convinced me was how predictable these behaviors became once I understood them. Different women, different contexts, same responses. The consistency made it impossible to dismiss as coincidence. And yet, I understood why I had missed them before. None of these signals announce themselves. They don't flatter. They don't confirm. They don't reassure. They require attention without neediness. observation without expectation. Most men don't observe that way. They're too focused on outcome. Once I shifted my focus from, is she interested, to, how is she behaving? And the answers became obvious. Attraction wasn't loud, it was persistent. Didn't rush, it lingered. This understanding also removed pressure. I didn't need to force interactions or prove anything. I could let positioning do its work, let timing unfold, let interest reveal itself through repetition rather than escalation. The irony is that the more I stopped trying to read attraction emotionally, the clearer it became behaviorally. Visual signals are the foundation. They're the first layer. They show interest before words, before touch, before intention is ever acknowledged consciously. If you don't know how to read this layer, you miss everything that comes after. I hadn't been unseen. I had been untrained. And once I corrected that the world started speaking a language, I finally understood. After I learned to read visual signals, something else became impossible to ignore. Proximity was never accidental. Women who were attracted to me didn't rush toward interaction. They moved closer in ways that could always be explained away. They didn't approach directly. They positioned. At first, I thought this was coincidence. Then, I noticed repetition, too consistent to be random. I began seeing the same woman appear near me multiple times in a single setting, not directly beside me, not uncomfortably close, just close enough to exist in my awareness. If I moved, she eventually reappeared in my general area. Not following, repositioning. This was the orbit. Orbiting is not chasing, it's controlled proximity. A woman places herself near a man she's attracted to, so interaction can happen naturally if conditions align. If nothing happens, she loses nothing. If something does, she didn't have to risk overt rejection. I used to underestimate how intentional this was. I thought women were passive in attraction. They aren't. They're precise. What made orbiting hard to detect was how well it blended into normal behavior. She needed a drink. The bar happened to be near me. She wanted to talk to a friend. That friend happened to be where I was standing. She needed to check something. The path passed right by me. Each individual action meant nothing. The pattern meant everything. Another behavior appeared alongside orbiting. Manufactured reasons. When women didn't want to simply stand nearby, they created justifications to enter my space, asking a question they already knew the answer to, commenting on something irrelevant, referring to a shared environment as an excuse to speak. These interactions were rarely deep. They weren't meant to be. Their purpose was contact, a test, a way to feel my energy up close and see how I responded. I had ignored these moments before because they felt insignificant. I thought interest required depth or flirtation. In reality, these small engagements were probes. If I was receptive, calm, and present, the interaction expanded. If not, it retreated without consequence. Women don't escalate blindly. They gather data. I also noticed how women integrated themselves into my social space without invitation. They didn't ask to join. They joined. Sitting at the same table, entering conversations already in progress, participating as if they belonged there. This wasn't entitlement. It was confidence driven by attraction. When a woman perceives a man as high value, she assumes social permission around him. His space feels accessible. I used to think this meant nothing because it wasn't romantic. That was another misunderstanding. Attraction often enters socially before it becomes personal. A woman wants to be seen around a man she's attracted to, associated with him, included in his circle. That association itself is a signal. I began noticing how women responded when I acknowledged their presence versus when I didn't. If I was open, grounded, and attentive, they stayed. They lingered. They contributed. If I was distracted or closed, they withdrew smoothly. No drama. No confrontation. This taught me something important. Attraction doesn't demand. It offers. Another overlooked behavior was repeated passing. At social gatherings, some women found reasons to pass by me multiple times. Not stopping, not engaging, just passing. Each pass allowed visual contact, energy exchange, a chance to be noticed without commitment. The frequency mattered. 1 pass meant nothing. 5 meant intention. These passes were often accompanied by small adjustments. A slower pace, a glance, a slight turn of the head. Subtle signals layered together. I realized then how much attraction relies on optionality. Women want to be close to what they desire while maintaining control over exposure. Proximity without pressure is the safest path. What surprised me most was how often I had been the center of these patterns without realizing it. I thought interest required boldness. I didn't see how strategic subtlety could be. Another shift happened when I noticed how women behaved when I spoke to someone else. Some would reposition to stay within earshot. Others would watch reactions. Some would disengage briefly, then return later. This wasn't jealousy yet. It was monitoring. Attention allocation, deciding where they stood in the social field around me. I also began noticing how women reacted when I left an area. Some followed shortly after, not immediately, enough time to appear natural. Others waited, then reappeared later in a new context. Again, not chasing, orbiting. What made all of this clear was repetition across environments. Work events, social gatherings, casual settings, different women, same behaviors. Once you see the pattern, you can't unsee it. I understood then why so many men misjudge their attractiveness. These signals are quiet. They don't reward ego. They reward awareness. Men who need validation miss them. Men who observe calmly recognize them. This understanding changed how I responded. I stopped forcing conversation. I stopped trying to impress. I allowed proximity to do the work. I focused on being present and grounded. The irony was immediate. The less I chased interaction, the more interaction unfolded naturally. Because attraction thrives in space, not pressure. Proximity is communication. It tells you who wants access without asking for it. Most men are waiting for women to step directly into their space. They don't realize women are already there, just not in the way men expect. Once I recognized orbiting manufactured reasons and social integration for what they were, I stopped feeling overlooked. I realized I had been surrounded by signals I didn't know how to interpret. Attraction wasn't absent, it was subtle. And subtle doesn't mean weak, it means controlled. As I became more aware of proximity and positioning, I started noticing something that had always been there, hiding in plain sight. The way people responded when I spoke. At first, it felt uncomfortable to acknowledge. I didn't want to read too much into it. I told myself it was situational, contextual. But again, repetition removed doubt. When I spoke in group settings, conversations often slowed down, not dramatically. Just enough to create space. People turned their bodies toward me. Eye contact aligned. The room subtly reorganized itself around my voice. This wasn't authority in the loud sense. It wasn't dominance through force. It was attention through presence. I began noticing that when I introduced a thought, others paused before responding. When I offered an opinion, it carried weight beyond the words themselves. When I stopped talking, there was a brief silence. as if the group was waiting for something to settle. I hadn't earned this through effort. It wasn't performance, it was perception. This is where the halo effect quietly operates. People unconsciously associate physical attractiveness and calm confidence with intelligence, competence, and leadership. Not because it's logically accurate, but because the brain looks for shortcuts. If someone appears composed and grounded, they are assumed to be capable. Women notice this immediately. So do men. I saw how women responded differently when I spoke compared to when others did. Their posture shifted, their focus sharpened. They listened with their whole body, not just their ears. They remembered what I said later, referenced it, built on it. At the time, I thought that meant I was simply articulate. In reality, articulation was amplified by perceived value. Another pattern emerged around decision-making. In group environments, people often deferred to me. Not formally, casually. They asked what I thought before moving forward. They waited for my reaction before committing to plans. This wasn't because I demanded control. It happened because influence naturally follows perceived status. I noticed that when I changed topics, others followed. When I suggested an idea, it was considered seriously. When I expressed preference, the group adjusted around it. These weren't favors, they were reflexes. Attractiveness creates gravity. Men often misunderstand this. They think attraction only affects romantic outcomes. In reality, it shapes social dynamics. It influences who speaks, who listens, who leads, and who adapts. Women are especially sensitive to this because it signals how a man is treated by others. Social proof matters. A man who is listened to is safer to desire than one who has to fight for attention. I also became aware of how interruptions worked. When I was interrupted, the interrupter often stopped mid-sentence and deferred back to me. When I interrupted, even unintentionally, others allowed it without resistance. That kind of tolerance doesn't come from politeness alone. It comes from perceived hierarchy. This wasn't about dominance over others. It was about ease within the group. I didn't push to be heard. I was heard because the group expected value when I spoke. Once I saw this, I understood why women's attraction intensified in group settings. A man who commands attention without effort signals something powerful. Emotional stability, social competence, internal certainty. None of that requires flirting. Another detail stood out. People mirrored my conversational pace. If I spoke slowly, the group slowed down. If I paused, others paused. Rhythm aligned around me without instruction. That alignment is a form of influence most men never notice, but women feel it immediately. It tells them who sets the tone. I also noticed how silence functioned differently for me. When I stopped talking, the silence didn't feel awkward. It felt intentional, comfortable. That kind of silence communicates confidence more than words ever could. Men who feel the need to fill space rarely generate attraction. Men who are comfortable leaving space intact do. I realized then that my earlier self-assessment had ignored an entire layer of information. I had been measuring attraction by direct feedback while overlooking how people behaved around me collectively. Attractiveness isn't just how someone reacts to you one-on-one. It's how the environment reorganizes itself around your presence. Once I recognized this, my behavior shifted naturally. I didn't talk more. I talked less. I chose my words carefully. I allowed silence to work. I stopped trying to prove value and let value reveal itself. The result was subtle, but consistent. More attention, more respect, more interest. Not because I changed who I was, but because I stopped interfering with what was already there. This level of influence is invisible to men who are outcome-focused. They're watching for approval. They miss alignment. They're waiting for permission. They don't notice that permission has already been granted through behavior. Women don't need to say they're drawn to you when their entire posture does it for them. When the room listens to you, she notices. When others defer, she registers it. When your presence changes, the dynamic attraction deepens. This is why some men feel magnetic without understanding why. They aren't trying to lead. They are simply allowed to. Understanding this removed another layer of doubt. I wasn't guessing anymore. I was observing cause and effect. Attraction leaves fingerprints everywhere. In conversation flow, in group behavior, in who adapts to whom. Once you see those fingerprints, you stop questioning your value. You start operating from it. After I understood how influence worked in groups, I started noticing something even more subtle. Something that happened without intention, without awareness, without permission. Mirroring. At first, it felt almost unsettling. I would lean back in my chair and a woman across from me would do the same a few seconds later. I'd rest my hand against my face, and shortly after, she would mirror the gesture. I'd cross my arms, and she'd adjust her posture in a similar way. These weren't conscious decisions. They happened too naturally, too smoothly. Mirroring is the body's way of signaling psychological alignment. When someone feels connected, safe, or drawn in their nervous system, synchronizes. The body follows before the mind explains. I had seen this behavior before, but I never connected it to attraction. I assumed it meant comfort or politeness. In reality, it meant attunement. Women who were not interested did not mirror. Their bodies remained independent, their posture unchanged, their movements self-contained. There was no synchronization. Once again, the difference wasn't intensity, it was consistency. Beyond individual gestures, I noticed something deeper: rhythm matching. If I spoke slowly and deliberately, some women adjusted their pace to match mine. Their sentences shortened, their tones softened, their timing aligned. If I was more animated, their energy rose. If I was calm, they settled. This wasn't imitation, it was calibration. When a woman is attracted, she unconsciously tries to match the emotional frequency of the man she's responding to. This creates rapport without effort. Conversation flows. Silence feels natural. There's no friction. I used to think chemistry was something mysterious, something you either had or didn't. What I realized was that chemistry is often synchronization misinterpreted as magic. Another layer revealed itself over time: extended exposure. Women who spent more time around me began adopting small aspects of my behavior. Not immediately. Gradually, they used similar hand gestures, adopted similar phrasing, even mirrored facial expressions in subtle ways. This wasn't mimicry, it was absorption. When someone finds another person compelling, they study them unconsciously. They internalize traits. They incorporate elements that feel effective or grounding. This is one of the most sincere forms of attraction because it happens without intent to impress. I had dismissed this before because it didn't feel romantic. It felt neutral. But attraction isn't always romantic in expression. Sometimes it's gravitational. What mattered most was that this mirroring happened without escalation. No flirting, no touching, no explicit signals, just alignment. That's why most men miss it. They expect attraction to move forward. They don't realize it often moves inward first. Another important detail emerged: the timing of mirroring. It didn't happen instantly. There was always a slight delay, a few seconds, sometimes longer. That delay matters. Immediate copying looks forced. Delayed mirroring signals unconscious processing. The body registers first, then responds. I also noticed mirroring increased when I was emotionally grounded, not excited, not reactive, calm, present. When my internal state was stable, synchronization happened more easily. This taught me something crucial. Attraction isn't about stimulation alone. It's about regulation. Women are drawn to men whose nervous systems feel safe to align with. A regulated man invites regulation in others. I began to see how mirroring worked in contrast. When I was distracted, anxious, or mentally elsewhere, alignment broke. Conversations felt disjointed. Movements didn't sync. Energy stayed separate. Nothing dramatic happened. But the connection weakened. This reinforced a pattern I couldn't ignore. Attraction responds to internal state more than external behavior. Another behavior accompanied mirroring. Orientation toward emotional tone. When I spoke about something serious, women who were attuned leaned in emotionally. Their expressions softened. When I joked lightly, their expressions lifted. Their reactions matched not the words, but the underlying emotional direction. That matching wasn't politeness, it was engagement. I realized then that women don't just respond to what you say. They respond to how you're being while you say it. And when they're attracted, they align with that being. This level of attunement doesn't happen by accident. It requires interest, comfort, psychological openness. I also noticed how mirroring extended into silence. When I paused, they paused. When I held eye contact without speaking, they stayed present instead of breaking away. Silence became shared rather than awkward. Shared silence is one of the strongest indicators of attraction and trust. It means neither person feels the need to perform. Before I understood this, I thought silence was a failure. Now I saw it as confirmation. The final realization came when I compared reactions across women. Those who mirrored consistently also showed other attraction signals. Proximity, positioning, visual tracking. The signals clustered. Mirroring never appeared alone. It was part of a system. That's what made it undeniable. Attraction isn't one behavior. It's a convergence. When multiple unconscious signals point in the same direction, the conclusion becomes clear. This understanding changed how I interacted. I stopped trying to manufacture chemistry. I focused on staying grounded, present, regulated, and chemistry happened on its own. Mirroring isn't something you force, it's something you allow. Once I learned to recognize it, I stopped needing reassurance. The body doesn't lie. It responds honestly to what it's drawn toward. And when someone's body begins to move with yours, you don't need words to know where you stand. Once I understood how women responded unconsciously, I began paying closer attention to something equally revealing: how men responded to me. At first, I didn't think male behavior mattered. I assumed attraction was a private exchange between a man and a woman. I was wrong. Male reactions are often the clearest indicators of where you stand in the social hierarchy. High-value men don't waste energy competing with men they don't respect. When confident, established men interacted with me, there was a noticeable tone: calm, open, respectful. They listened when I spoke. They included me in conversations without testing me. They treated me as a peer rather than a rival. This wasn't friendliness. It was recognition. Men who were secure in themselves had no need to posture. They aligned. They collaborated. They shared information and access. This kind of response only happens when a man is perceived as valuable enough to be included rather than challenged. At the same time, a different pattern emerged with less secure men. Some became noticeably competitive. They spoke louder when I entered a conversation. They interrupted more. They tried to tell better stories. They leaned into humor or dominance displays that hadn't been there before. At first, I thought they were just energetic, but the timing was too precise. Their behavior escalated only when I was present. Competition is a response to threat. Not hatred, not dislike, threat. Men don't compete with men they don't take seriously. Others reacted differently. Instead of competing, they copied. Subtly at first. Similar grooming choices, similar clothing styles, similar ways of speaking. Over time, the imitation became obvious. Imitation is admiration without acknowledgement. When men copy your style or mannerisms, they are signaling that they see something effective in you. They may not like it consciously, but they respect it enough to replicate it. Then there were men who responded with avoidance. They excluded me from conversations, ignored my contributions, dismissed my ideas without engaging them. Sometimes they used passive-aggressive humor. Other times they pretended I wasn't there. These behaviors confused me early on. I thought I had done something wrong. In reality, these were defensive responses. Men who feel threatened but lack confidence often try to remove the source rather than confront it. Exclusion is safer than competition. None of these behaviors happen in a vacuum. They are reactions to perceived status. And women notice all of them. Women are constantly scanning male-male interactions to understand hierarchy. How men treat you tells her how she should treat you. If other men defer, include, or compete with you, it elevates your perceived value instantly. I also began noticing assumptions people made about my romantic life. Without me saying anything, people assumed I had options, that I was dating, that women were interested. Comments like, "Someone like you probably has plenty of opportunities," were offered casually. Not as compliments, as conclusions. Those assumptions didn't come from my words. They came from my presence. Women also displayed behaviors that surprised me at first. Territoriality. Even without any commitment, some women became possessive of my attention. They steered conversations back to themselves, positioned their bodies between me and other women, reacted subtly when I gave attention elsewhere. This wasn't jealousy in the dramatic sense. It was valuation. People don't guard what they don't value. Another signal came in the form of curiosity. People asked about my relationship status without prompting, not aggressively, casually, as if the answer mattered. That curiosity indicated expectation. They assumed there was something to inquire about. I also noticed status projection. People assumed I was successful, well-connected, established. Even when they had no evidence, they filled in the blanks favorably. This is how perception works. Attractiveness creates a narrative. People build stories around you that match their assessment of your value. At first, this made me uncomfortable. I didn't want to benefit from assumptions. But denying them didn't change their existence. Understanding them changed how I interpreted interactions. I realized that attraction isn't just how women respond privately. It's how the social ecosystem reacts publicly. Once again, I had been ignoring data because it didn't fit my internal story. The most revealing realization came when I saw how women reacted to these male dynamics. When other men deferred to me, women's interest sharpened. When competition appeared, attention increased. When exclusion attempts failed, respect grew. Attraction amplifies around social proof. This is why some men become more attractive in groups than alone. Their value becomes visible through interaction, not self-promotion. It also explained why some men feel invisible despite good looks. Without social validation, attraction has no framework to attach to. Once I recognized this, I stopped viewing male reactions as noise. They were signals, clear ones. Respect, competition, imitation, exclusion. Each pointed to the same conclusion. I wasn't being ignored. I was being evaluated. And often that evaluation was far more favorable than I had assumed. This understanding corrected another blind spot. Attraction isn't silent. It's just not always directed at you verbally. It echoes through how people organize themselves around you, how they respond to your presence, how they adjust their behavior when you enter or leave. Men reveal your value as clearly as women do, sometimes more honestly. Once I accepted that my self-perception shifted again, not upward, sharper. I wasn't exceptional, but I wasn't invisible either. I was operating from a position of underestimated strength. And that realization set the stage for the most important insight of all. After observing how both women and men responded to me, a final question emerged. If the signals were this consistent, why hadn't I recognized them earlier? The answer wasn't lack of evidence, it was adaptation. Psychologists call it baseline adjustment. When a certain level of attention, respect, or interest becomes consistent, it stops feeling remarkable. It becomes normal. What once would have stood out starts to feel like background noise. That was happening to me without my awareness. I had grown accustomed to being listened to being included, to subtle interest from women. None of it felt special anymore, so none of it registered as information. I assumed this was how everyone was treated. That assumption was wrong. Most men do not experience these patterns consistently. They notice them when they happen because they are rare. When something is rare, it feels meaningful. When it's constant, it fades into expectation. This explained why genuinely attractive men often doubt themselves. Their reference point is distorted by familiarity. Another distortion came from comparison. I wasn't comparing myself to the average man. I was comparing myself to ideals, to celebrities, to the most dominant, visible, or socially aggressive men in any room. Those men represent the top fraction, not the baseline. Upward comparison erodes accurate self-assessment. When you measure yourself against extremes, you ignore where you actually stand in the distribution. You only see who is ahead, not who is behind. This is compounded by humility. Many attractive men possess self-awareness and restraint. They question themselves. They assume gaps. They don't walk through the world expecting admiration. That humility is appealing, but it also masks impact. Meanwhile, men with less self-awareness often assume high value by default. They don't question. They overestimate. Confidence without calibration is common. This creates a paradox. The men most attractive to women are often the least convinced of it. I also realized that I had internalized false narratives about what attractiveness should feel like. I expected certainty, clarity, obvious feedback. When attraction didn't arrive in that form, I assumed it wasn't there. In reality, attraction often exists as tension rather than confirmation, interest without resolution, curiosity without declaration. Another factor was desensitization. When you're exposed to subtle positive feedback over time, your nervous system adapts. The same look that once would have felt charged now feels neutral. The same deference that once would have surprised you now feels routine. Without contrast, you lose awareness. I also underestimated how much my own behavior suppressed feedback. Because I didn't believe I was attractive. I didn't lean into opportunities. I didn't escalate. I didn't test interest. I stayed contained. This containment prevented clearer signals from forming. Attraction existed, but it didn't move forward because I didn't create conditions for movement. That wasn't humility. It was miscalibration. Another realization followed. Many attractive men assume that if women were truly interested, something would have happened by now. They forget that attraction alone doesn't guarantee action. Timing, context, fear, and opportunity matter. A woman can be interested for years without ever acting on it. That doesn't negate attraction. It reflects complexity. The final layer was self-image. Once you form an identity around being average or overlooked, your mind filters information to protect that identity. You downplay confirming evidence. You highlight contradictions. This keeps your self-concept stable, even if it's inaccurate. I had been doing this unconsciously. When evidence of attraction appeared, I dismissed it. When evidence of indifference appeared, I magnified it. The pattern reinforced itself. Breaking that loop required deliberate observation without emotional interpretation. When I finally stepped back and looked at behavior over time, the conclusion became unavoidable. I had been underestimating myself, not in an egotistical sense, in a practical one. That realization didn't inflate me, it grounded me. I stopped chasing validation. I stopped doubting neutral outcomes. I stopped interpreting silence as rejection. My confidence changed, not because I told myself I was attractive, but because the evidence finally aligned with my self-perception. This shift had a compounding effect. When confidence increased, behavior stabilized. When behavior stabilized, attraction increased. When attraction increased, feedback became clearer. This created a positive loop instead of a suppressive one. I understood then why awareness is so dangerous and so powerful. Once you see yourself accurately, you can no longer act from distortion. You stop settling for less than your value. You stop tolerating misalignment. You choose environments and relationships that reflect who you actually are, not who you assumed you were. Most men never reach this point. They stay trapped between insecurity and arrogance, underestimating or overcompensating. Accurate self-assessment is rare, and rare things are powerful. Understanding that I wasn't exceptional but also not invisible freed me. I didn't need to prove anything. I didn't need to chase extremes. I could operate calmly within my real range. That calmness became part of my appeal. Attraction doesn't require exaggeration. It requires alignment. Once I aligned my self-image with reality, everything downstream improved. Decisions became clearer, boundaries firmer, opportunities more appropriate. The tragedy isn't that men lack attractiveness. It's that many never realize what they already have. What I want to leave you with is this: most problems in life don't come from lack of potential. They come from distorted self-perception. When you don't see yourself clearly, you make smaller decisions than you need to. You tolerate situations that don't fit you. You hesitate when you should move. You stay quiet when your presence already carries weight, not because you are weak, but because you are miscalibrated. True confidence is not loud. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't demand validation. It comes from alignment between who you are and how you move through the world. When your self-image matches reality, your nervous system settles. You stop overthinking. You stop chasing outcomes. You start responding instead of reacting. This applies far beyond attraction. It affects your career choices, your boundaries, the people you allow close, and the life you build over time. When you underestimate yourself, you don't just lose opportunities, you shape a smaller life than you were meant to live. quietly, slowly, without realizing it. The goal is not ego. The goal is accuracy. Accurate self-awareness allows humility without self-erasure, confidence without arrogance, and ambition without desperation. It allows you to grow without pretending and to stand still without fear. If this message resonated with you, I want to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment and share what stood out or where in your life you felt this misalignment before. And if you value grounded, honest reflections like this, consider subscribing to the channel. Not for hype, but for clarity. Because when you see yourself clearly, everything else starts to fall into place.